Hi, everyone. We're going to get started in a moment. As usual, I have to set everything up on Facebook Live so I can stream this live on Facebook. So give me 1 minute or two, and then I start with videos and I go into the interviews and the rest of the show. So please be patient, bear with me, and we'll be starting in just a couple of minutes. Almost there. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Grassroots Voices. We're going to get started in a couple of minutes. As usual, I like to start with a few videos, and then I will move into the actual interview, just to give everybody a few minutes to hop on. So 1 moment. Thank you all for joining me. We'll get started in just a second. Thank you. So just giving everyone a few minutes to hop on. We'll get started in just a second. Thank you. Very excited for our guests today. Power the Vote. They were so helpful in Georgia, and I can't wait for you all to hear more about them. So as usual, I'm going to give people a few minutes to hop on, and then I start the videos just in the beginning again, so I can share the episode across the groups, but we will get started in a moment. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to start with some videos, and then I'll give people a chance to hop on. So I'll give you people about 30 more seconds. Okay, here we go. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start the videos, and then we'll hop into the rest of the show. Thank you for your patience, and here we go.
And plus, just like the AIDS vaccine, mandating it didn't work.
It is of grave concern when our highest ranking elected official in our state provides misinformation, not once, not twice, but 3 times.
Georgians rely on public officials, especially the governor of our state, to provide accurate information when it comes to public health. This only re-emphasizes why it is so urgent for our state to take up full Medicaid expansion during the special session later this fall.
We have the data that shows that Medicaid expansion works, not just in giving access to healthcare in general, but it specifically works to reduce HIV rates in states that have expanded Medicaid.
I was honestly quite shocked. It was said with confidence. It was built into a narrative about why vaccines could not be required. It was a core message rather than a misphrased aside, and it was still incorrect.
Multiple times in the past year, Kemp has made reference to a non-existent AIDS vaccine as justification to be a do-nothing governor who puts his politics before the health and safety of those he is supposed to serve.
And here's a response by Senator John Ossoff.
In Georgia, we've lost 9 hospitals in the last 11 years. Senator Reverend Warnock and I campaigned in Cuthbert, Georgia. Their hospital closed in the middle of this pandemic. Can you imagine? The only hospital for hours around in your community closing in the middle of a pandemic. And these hospitals in Georgia have closed in large part because our state political leaders have refused to expand Medicaid. I met a woman in Cuthbert last year whose brother experienced a medical emergency on Thanksgiving, had to be rushed to Columbus, Georgia. That's over an hour away to treat that medical emergency. And even folks who live in communities where the hospitals have stayed open can't afford the care, can't access the care because Georgia has refused to expand Medicaid. We have the chance now in Congress to change that. We have a moral imperative to expand Medicaid. As Senator Reverend Warnock said, access to health care shouldn't depend on where you live or who you are. Health care is a human right. We can make that a reality across this country by taking action now.
Around the block.
Voter suppression, purposely.
Lines snaked around the block.
Voter suppression, purposely, making it harder for some people to cast their ballot.
Voters waited and waited.
I received a letter from my voter's office stating that I am a deceased person. What bothered me is, where did this information come from?
I volunteered to count absentee ballots from military members overseas. The man standing right next to me started the chant to stop the count. These are the votes that we can't count?
When I signed up, there was no lines for me to get into the Army. So why should I and my fellow brothers and sisters in arms have to stand in long lines to cast a ballot?
No one should have to wait this long to exercise their constitutional right to vote.
Voter suppression is not politics. It is an attack on our democracy.
Tell Congress to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and the For the People Act today. Paid for by Fair Fight Action.
Wonderful. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Grassroots Voices with Robin and Friends, where community and politics meet. I'm Robin Donaldson. I started this Facebook Live show because I had met so many people over the last 2 years, really really goes back decades, but definitely the last 2 years, people who work in politics, community organizing, coalition building, not the nonprofit sector. And there's so many just wonderful people out there who are doing amazing work, who are real change agents, who are making the sacrifices to make sure that we have a better society, a better country and world. And I thought it would be great, especially during this in-between year before the midterms, I thought it would be great to bring some of these people on to a show to share their work, to uplift their voices and elevate the already existing work that they're doing. Because I know a lot of times it feels very overwhelming dealing with all of the issues in the world and in our country right now. And it's great to know that there's people out there who are fighting the good fight. So that was the intention for Grassroots Voices. And that's how I ended up starting the show. So this show is streamed through Team Stacey Abrams Grassroots. We are not officially affiliated with Stacey Abrams. We are made up of supporters and volunteers and admirers of Leader Abrams and the work that she's done around voting rights, the census, Southern policy. And so this is a place where we have gathered since March of 2020. And we have been a very robust group, a very active group, online and offline. And so please, if you have not joined us, please join us. We are about almost 23,000 members, and I'm sure we'll continue to grow over the next year. We also have sister groups. So there's Team Stacey Abrams Grassroots and Team Georgia Blue. Those are the two groups I founded. And then we have a bunch of sister groups, I like to call them, made up of similar supporters. So again, join Team Stacey Abrams Grassroots and then consider joining our other sister groups because we have all types of members and there's different information posted in each group. There's not that much overlap occasionally, but a lot of the information is very unique to that group. So thank you to Stacey Abrams Fair Fight Club, Stacey Abrams for President. This was started before President Biden announced for president back in 2019. And then A Blue Georgia for a Stronger and Progressive America, Envoys for Humanity, Disability and Democracy, and the Rural Progressive and Afro Southeast Georgian Facebook groups. So again, the first two are my groups, and then the rest I help support and admin. And there's a lot of, again, very dedicated admins and moderators in those groups. And we've all joined together and we've done a lot of amazing work over the last year and a half. And before we get going, if you could just please like and share this episode right now, I'd really appreciate it. Tag a friend in the comments if you think someone you know would be interested in this information. Join our groups, keep fighting for voting rights. And if you'd like to make a grassroots contribution, I'll go ahead and drop that link in the comments now, and I'll mention it at the end of the show. But these are all ways that you can support Grassroots Voices, support me, and support me bringing more guests onto the show. I do this as a labor of love. I'm not getting, like a salary or paid for this. I just do this because I think it's very important to highlight this work, and I feel like it's going to help us overall and help the bottom line of all of the progress we're working so hard to make every year. So again, just support in whatever way you can. Grassroots donations are fine, but if you don't want to do that, then again, like and share, tag a friend, join our groups, and keep fighting for voting rights. So this brings me to this episode. I'm very excited to introduce everybody to Power the Vote and to the founders, Jamil A. Favors and Kimberley Allen. They're both attorneys. They both were in the trenches with us here in Georgia during the 2020 election and during the runoffs. And they have started Power the Vote, and they're going to talk about They're going to talk about how to power the vote and why we need voter protection teams across the country, and talk a little bit about what they did in Georgia to protect the vote and what they're going to be doing 2022 and beyond. So they are not partisan, but they will, just talk a little bit about their past work, but they're fabulous. I was so happy they were willing to come on the show, and we were able to work everything out with everyone's schedules, and it's a real honor to have them on here. And I love love attorneys. I have a JD. I love talking to attorneys, and I love, the way they think and the way they move in the world. So it's wonderful that we can have them join us. Okay, so episode 9, Power the Vote. We're joined by special guests, Jamil A. Favors, Esquire, and Kimberley Allen, Esquire. Jamil was a deputy director of voter protection with the Democratic Party of Georgia for the 2020 runoffs after volunteering with the voter protection team since 2018. Jamil is an associate at Crevelin and Horst, LLC, and a former associate at the international law firm Jones Day. Jamil regularly speaks on voting rights, volunteers with local organizations, and mentors high school and college students in his native Atlanta. He's a graduate of Howard University and the University of Pennsylvania School of Law. Kimberley Allen, Esquire, she joined Power the Vote from Covington and Burling LLP, where she was special counsel in the commercial litigation group. During the 2020 election cycle, Kim was Deputy Director of Voter Protection at the Democratic Party of Georgia, where she led the ballot monitoring program. So thank you for joining us. I'm going to bring them in. So just give me a second to bring them in from Zoom. All right. Hello, hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey, Robin. Hey, Kim. How y'all doing?
Doing well. Yes. Thank you so much for joining me and joining everyone here at Grassroots Voices. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, so, I thought we could I don't know if you want to start with Power the Vote, or if you want to start with how Power the Vote came into being and some of your work in Georgia. So, I'm just going to leave it up to you all where we can start, and then we'll just go from there.
Sure. Yeah, well, so maybe I'll kick us off. We're the co-founders of an organization called Power the Vote. During the 2020 cycle, we led the voter protection program at the Democratic Party of Georgia. And afterwards, we came away feeling that voter protection was essential to lifting up voters, to ensuring that voters had access to the vote. And we wanted to take the work that we did in Georgia and build on that. And so we founded Power the Vote to do two things. The first is to fund voter protection programs at state Democratic parties. We're targeting 5 states to start: Texas, Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona, and Florida. And the second is that we'd like to provide those teams with expertise, training, and support, and help them adapt the Georgia model for voter protection to the landscape in their state. So Jamil, maybe I'll let you, take it from here.
Yeah. So one, I always like to give just an amazing hat nod to Kim, because I think, this is truly a brainchild of hers, and seeing the work that she did in Georgia and being able to see this through fruition. I'm a really big fan if you got to give people their roses, and especially people who are doing, as we like to say, God's work. So with that, voter protection is just like this term that I feel like it's used all around, right? So what do we think of when we're talking about voter protection? We're talking about that last mile of voting. That's what we like to call it. So we think about it in 3 ways. We want to make sure that every eligible voter actually can vote, that their vote actually counts. And because we learned that this is an issue in Georgia, when there's a winner, that those ballots are actually certified. We've moved away from a space when, you can just register individuals to vote and then get out the vote. While that's necessary, it's no longer sufficient because of the laws that we have in places like Georgia, Texas, Florida. Of course, these are the states that we're doing the work in. We recognize we have to have that extra mile of voting, and that's where we come in. And it's not to say that individuals don't care about this space. It's just to say that we saw the work that we did. We care about it so much that we decided to make it a whole organization.
I love that. Yes, I'm originally from Illinois, and I lived in Florida for college, and then I went back in 2008 to work on Barack Obama's presidential campaign, and then I moved to Georgia years later. But I just, I took for granted how, easy it was to vote in Illinois. And then now I'm so, hyper vigilant in, checking my ballot, making sure it was counted and seeing it all the way through, because it really, like you said, it's really that last mile, and you have to be vigilant the entire way.
That's right. That's right. And we founded Power the Vote to fund voter protection work at state Democratic parties for a really specific reason, which is that the Democratic Party and also the Republican Party, if they chose to do it, has a role to play in election administration and in voter protection that is really unique. And I think a lot of folks don't appreciate this, but under state law in every state, they have some role to play, whether that's appointing poll watchers who can be inside of polling places. In some states, the parties appoint poll workers, they appoint election board members, and so on. And that's critical work. There was a recent ProPublica article that highlighted that Steve Bannon and Republicans are moving in the space to appoint, Republican poll workers and other kinds of elections officials. And so we were concerned at the end of 2020 when we came out of the win in Georgia, and we elected those two excellent senators that we love so much. We saw that all but 4 state Democratic parties had completely lost their voter protection programs. We knew from Georgia, voter protection work happens year round, whether that's fighting voter suppression bills or working to fight voter purges or developing relationships with elections officials, appointing election board members, whatever it is, that work happens year round. And we wanted to make sure that resources are there to keep voter protection infrastructure in place, to make sure that the Democratic Party is well positioned to do what they can do to help protect the vote and ensure that voters have access to the vote.
Mm-hmm. Is this, and so, when I think about the, Bush v. Gore, 2000, it seemed like for a long time, at least the way it was introduced to me, it seemed like voter protection was always coming in, after the fact, and it was too late. And I guess, since then, I know there's been a lot of changes, and I believe Georgia was their state party was one of the first to have voter protection year round, and then, a couple of years ago, and then maybe eventually more parties. But what, I guess, is it a matter of funding, or why, I guess, don't parties typically have voter protection already built in?
I think funding is a really critical piece of it. I think so many state parties would want a robust year-round voter protection program if they had the money to do it. Typically, in my experience, look, I'm fairly new to this space. Until I worked with the Democratic Party of Georgia in the 2020 cycle, I was a litigator and I was not working in any kind of political space. But my understanding is that state parties are actually really under-resourced. And that's a shame, because they're the ones who are there year round. The campaigns come in just a few months before the election and they kind of parachute in. But we want to support and resource the people who are there year round in these communities, building out networks of volunteers. That's critical infrastructure, and it is under-resourced. I think the other challenge is that typically the Democratic Party has been in a campaign mindset. And so they're very used to just throwing a ton of resources at this problem right at the very end. And I think, what we hope to do is move the party and move, donors and move other folks in the direction of thinking about ways that you can make smaller investments earlier on that have a bigger impact over time. This is one area where we think that's very much ripe for doing. And we hope that that's where the party moves in the long term.
And just to follow up on what Kim said, I also think, Robin, it's just a change in mindset. And I think that's a change in mindset all across the board, because before, like I said, you can do voter registration, you can do get out the vote. And a number of these issues outside of just registering the vote weren't brought up until actually the election and after the election. But now we're able to see in midterms, we're able to see in municipals whether a county that has Black and brown individuals has less drop boxes than a county that doesn't. We're able to necessarily see whether there are voter purges on rolls all across the state. And so that's why we need individuals there year round. You're right, Georgia was one of the first states. And again, it has ramped up over the years, but unfortunately, it's one of those situations where you sometimes lose that historical knowledge because you ramp up and then ramp back down. Just like Kim just said, it's that campaign mindset. And that's what we're trying to come in and have a new mindset to say, as we always say, you never have to get ready if you stay ready. And what Power the Vote is trying to do is ensuring that we have people there year round that are staying ready, doing the doing the work, so that when those elections do come around, they're already put in place and we can triage at a much, much larger scale.
And I do think, you're always going to have the campaign infrastructure that comes in. You'll have poll watching programs that build out, and you'll also have other kinds of campaign centered programming that builds out. But that programming is so much more effective when you already have a foundation laid, where you have relationships that are long-term with elections offices, when you have dedicated networks of volunteers who've been engaged all throughout the election cycle. And also you can test and iterate. You can work on these programs year round and make them better. And then when it's time, when that critical, year-round election comes around in November, you're so much more better prepared, and you can actually solve voters' problems because you've got the pre-existing relationships in place to get the job done.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know. And even like here in Georgia, there's been, I was a poll watcher, during the 2020 cycle, and, also did some volunteer work with Fair Fight when they were also sending people to observe the polls during the pandemic, during the primary season. But even after, like, things like ballot curing and doing things to help to make sure that people's votes were counted, it's a very cumbersome process. And it's, when you're kind of learning it on the fly, it can be very complex. So again, I think that's wonderful that you guys are thinking, having a greater view, of everything, because if a person is trained on this and they are comfortable and they understand this, then when it comes time, to do whatever work that they're doing, they, feel more comfortable in the process, because, it's so much happening at the end of those election days. Can you maybe talk about what is, I guess, maybe just like a standard voter protection program or team? Like what does that look like?
Yeah, so I'll tell you what it looked like in Georgia, and this is the model that we hope to help facilitate by funding in other states. We think of it as two components. The first is a year-round relational organizing approach to voter protection. And then the second is the campaign build out. During that year-round relational organizing approach, you have deputy or regional voter protection directors whose job it is primarily to develop relational networks within the state. They build out relationships with election supervisors and elections offices. They also coordinate with county Democratic parties and also build networks of volunteers around the state. And they basically mobilize around certain voter protection initiatives. And that could be registering voters, combating voter purges. It could be organizing and educating people around voter suppression bills and helping to mobilize people to try to defeat those bills. And then also it's working to understand how to organize around a voter suppression landscape, which is so difficult in Georgia, and it's difficult in a number of other places as well. And so that's a first really key component. And then when it's time for the election cycle to begin, and this is what we did in Georgia in 2020, we started before the primaries, building out the sort of election-related voter protection apparatus. We already had, Georgia has a year-round voter protection hotline, but you scale that up because you expect you're going to get a ton of calls. In Georgia in 2020, we received 130,000 calls on our hotline, which is truly extraordinary for a single state. And that's just our hotline. There are other hotlines out there too, so a lot of voters who needed to get help voting. And then you build out a poll watching program, a ballot cure program, which helps voters whose absentee ballots have been rejected or who have a provisional ballot that needs to be counted. And then a ballot monitoring component, which was my program. We had two types of volunteers in the ballot monitoring program. The first were those who went to elections offices and observed as they scanned and processed absentee ballots. And then the second were vote review panelists who would sit on a panel of 3 folks, usually a Republican, a Democrat, and an appointee of the elections office. And they would adjudicate ballots when there was some question as to how the voter had intended to vote. We operated statewide in all 159 counties to fight for voters. I think that was a critical aspect of our program. I mean, especially given that it's not like Joe Biden's margin was so big, it was just 12,000 votes, right? So you have to fight for voters all over the state. And that's how our program looked in 2020.
Wow.
And I should mention, Jamil had a voter education. Jamil, tell them about your portion of the program as well, which was also fantastic.
Absolutely. But before I get to the voter education, it's something that you talked about when we talked about ballot monitoring that I think it's just really critical. I want to take us back to the day right after the election. You know, we don't know, we assume that President Biden has won, but we don't necessarily know. I kid you not, Kim was galvanizing individuals to go to different county board of election offices. And you would think that you would think, oh, what does that really mean? Well, let me give you an example. At 7 o'clock in the morning, I kid you not, there's lines formed from the Republican side and the Democratic side. And these individuals are there watching individuals count the ballots and review the ballots. And let's say somebody from the Republican Party says, oh, we didn't like the way you counted that. If there's not someone there from the Democratic Party to necessarily challenge and come with law because they've had training from the ballot monitoring program, then guess what? That vote would have been kicked out. It's these small nicks that really can just make a big gash if you don't have these programs into place. So like Kim said, everyone knows this about me. For me, I love the voter education piece. I'm someone, you know, I've gotten a chance to drive in many places across Georgia, do a whole bunch of Zoom events just talking about voter education, because I'm of the mindset that while these programs are great, individuals can utilize the programs more and hopefully won't have to even be pushed into some of the programs of voter protection if they have the education at the outset. So it makes me think about, for instance, during the 2020 election, there was a college where we received notice that a number of college students, whether they were students registered in that county, whether they were students registered in different counties in the state, or whether they were students registered in different states, were putting all of their absentee ballots in one drop box on campus. Guess what? As you know, you can't do that if you're not registered in that particular county. Because we were able to have a relationship through voter education and other programs, we had did a voter education panel in that particular county. We had relationships. We were able to call that county and say, hey, this is what's happening. And through that relationship, that county stated that we're going to, you know, it's not that big of an expense to us and it's not that much time. We're going to take all of these ballots and we're going to mail them off to their right location. Again, this isn't something that we can put an accurate number to, but it is something that you can show. If it happened in one county, imagine if it happened in other counties, and imagine what would have happened had we not been doing voter education across colleges in the other counties where people aren't necessarily always reached out to because they're not necessarily in an election season.
You know, it reminds me just 2 things. I remember, you know, right after, you know, like Jamil was saying that we presumed or that Joe Biden had won Georgia, but I remember it was, you know, right after that, it was, we're going to not 1, but 2 runoffs. So meanwhile, you know, we're trying to prepare for the runoffs, and then all of this is happening with making sure somebody is, you know, going down there to watch the ballot counting and, you know, everything else. So it was so much happening, you know, simultaneously, you know, at the end of 2020. It was just, sometimes I look back and just can't believe, you know, all of that happened, plus the pandemic, plus the holidays and everything else. And then I just know after I was on John Ossoff's campaign team for the runoffs. And I remember, you know, after he, you know, was declared the winner, you know, we still had to, you know, give some time to go out to do some of the ballot curing. And again, you know, this isn't even just about, you know, Democrat or Republican, you know, necessarily, but, you know, the right to vote and protecting the vote applies to everyone. And that's why it's such a, you know, such an important issue. But yeah, I did want to talk a little bit about, you know, as far as Georgia was concerned, were you all involved with the recounts or any of that, or were you all just part of the ballot counting for just the first round of the general election counting.
Yeah, we first helped actually secure the original victory. There were enormous teams for the recount, and it was difficult because we were just coming off of the general election. We had 2 recounts, not just 1 recount. And then we're also trying to mobilize our programs because voting started, just like almost immediately after the second recount ended. So it was early voting, I should say. So it was like truly a heroic effort on everybody's part to get that going. So I know components of our team worked on the recount, but there were sort of basically portions of the Biden campaign that organized those recounts. But a lot of my networks of volunteers were there monitoring those recounts because it was a lot of the same, kind of work to rescan ballots, basically. So it was incredible.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much, because like I said, I was getting emails about like, can you come and volunteer? And then, we're doing this stuff for the runoff. And this was even before I, had joined the Ossoff team, but it was just, I really commend you all for, sticking through it and, persevering, because it just sucked the soul out of people, towards the end. It was just, it really was heroic. It truly was. And it's funny because David Plouffe, Obama's former campaign manager advisor, he wrote a book about the Citizen's Guide to Beating Donald Trump, and it came out, I think it was March 2020. And in there, he kind of went through had little short chapters on different battleground states, and Georgia was in there. And he said, he really was not a Georgia believer. If I ever see him again, I'm definitely gonna let him know he wasn't a Georgia believer. But I believed, it's like so many of us did, especially after just seeing the work Stacey Abrams and everyone did in 2018, but in the years leading up to that. But he had a quote, and I always mention it sometimes when I do a presentation in other places about the work the grassroots did, here in Georgia. And he said it would take a heroic effort to flip Georgia, and boy, did it. So thank you. You all are definitely heroes in my eyes.
Oh, thank you. Well, we had 10,000 volunteers in our program during the 2020 cycle. It was truly an army of people who stepped up. We had more people clamoring to volunteer than we could possibly even handle. And many of those are folks who are repeat volunteers who are very deeply invested in the program. And so my program, for example, I organized 1,000 volunteers. It was a 100% volunteer ran and managed program. And so I think that's one of the untold stories about the 2020 election, is just the number of ordinary people who put their lives on pause and said, we're going to get out there, do what we can to protect the vote. I'll also mention, we did it on truly, we're like true believers in this mission of voter protection. When folks call our hotline, we don't ask them, are you a Democrat or Republican? We just ask them, what's your problem and how can we help you? And I think that's something that really inspires people and just, makes them so committed to this program, is that really we're speaking to higher ideals about the integrity of the vote and ensuring that people have access to the vote. And, in the work we did, not only work to address really deep systemic barriers to voting, barriers that result in disproportionate rejections of absentee ballot rates or long lines in South Fulton versus North Fulton, or like whatever those systemic barriers are. But we also faced overt, clear discrimination, which we worked to combat. During the ballot monitoring process immediately after the November election, one of my volunteers was sitting in an elections office, and a gentleman, a Black man, came in to cure his ballot, which he had cast as a provisional ballot, I should say. And a Republican was there who came up to him and asked for his name, and he gave his name and then paused and said, "Wait. Who are you?" And she gave her name, and he said, "Do you work here?" And she said, "I work here today." And our volunteer, came screaming up and said, "Sir, she does not work here. She's a Republican operative. She's taking down your name." And it was like immediately clear that that person was there to try to prevent that man from having his vote counted. And she profiled him just based purely on his race, nothing else. And we were able to get that observer kicked out of the elections office because she had misrepresented that she was a member of the elections office staff. But that's the kind of work where it's like, you never know when that's going to happen, but you know it is going to happen. And we tried to have people there to make sure that people weren't intimidated from curing their ballots or otherwise prevented from having their votes counted. And I think that's important for people to know that, like, even to this day, that kind of overt discrimination exists. And that's part of our mission is to fight that and make sure that folks don't have their ballots wrongfully not counted.
Wow. That's crazy, but I believe it. When I moved here, I live in a swing district that's Democratic now here in Georgia, and I was going to vote, and I brought a friend to go vote too, and this was several years ago, but we were both going in there, and we asked for our ballots, and one of the men, he saw that we asked for a Democratic ballot, and he just starts yelling. When my friend was getting her ballot, we got a Democrat in here. And it was, and we, we're, very both involved in voting rights and volunteering and doing all this work around it, but it felt intimidating, and she did end up reporting it, later on and everything. But if you're new to voting or you're just unsure, that can really deter someone from returning to the polls or just feeling like they're doing something wrong. So again, thank you for highlighting that work.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And then maybe can you talk about why you chose the states that you chose, to launch Power the Vote?
Yeah, well, one of the lessons that we took from our work in Georgia is that a statewide program is especially important. A year-round statewide program, this kind of investment is really important in states where there are significant populations of rural voters of color. And in Georgia, that's a big factor, and you can't leave those voters behind. You have to make sure that they have every opportunity to vote and that we fight for them. And so we picked states where we felt this particular model of voter protection, a statewide year-round permanent program, would be similarly critical to ensuring that voters are able to vote, and that ultimately, when there's a close election, that we can help make the margin of victory. So all of our states have, they have a black belt, or Texas has, of course, the Rio Grande Valley and significant portions of Black voters in East Texas, which really, I think a lot of people don't appreciate or understand. And so we think, and I'll also mention Texas has 254 counties, which is the only state with more counties than Georgia. And we felt pretty strongly, look, if you're going to organize this type of a program in a state like Texas, you got to put serious resources into it. So that's not to say, all 5 of our states are states that benefit from this type of model. There are many others that would as well, but you have to start somewhere. So that's where we're starting.
Yeah.
And I'm here to say that's where we're starting, but that's not where we're ending. This is a program that definitely wants to start in these 5 states and continue to grow, because again, it's not a Democrat, it's not a Republic issue. It's a voter issue, and voters are all across the United States.
Yes. And then as far as the voter education that you've been doing, Jamil, what do you find typically maybe are some of the barriers in regards to people, to voters understanding the process?
Honestly, what I realize is that, for a large part, outside of individuals reaching out to people for their vote, they're not necessarily reaching out to people to understand the rights that they have around their vote. And I think that's just a very different conversation. If I'm coming to any individual and I'm trying to offer knowledge and not necessarily trying to get something in return, I think that's a very different conversation. And so being able to, and look, I'm an attorney. Sometimes the voting laws confuse me. And so I think oftentimes we talk about these things in these very convoluted ways instead of just breaking them down and having a conversation. And what I realize is that instead of speaking at individuals and speaking with them, allowing the Q&A to be a lot longer than the presentation works really, really well. So for me, I found that the biggest barrier was that there was nobody coming to their door to offer knowledge and listen to the issues. It was only somebody coming to the door to get their vote and listen to issues.
Yes. And I mean, and it really is, a lot of people, they really don't understand, how campaigns are run, or they don't understand how the voting process works. And even like you said, after your vote is cast, there's a whole, laundry list of things that needs to happen in order for then the results to be certified. So I do think that, again, that educating people and talking to people, and not just assuming that they understand is vital to understanding the process.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I also think voter education is a way to keep your energy up, because let's be honest, we were all tired after that runoff. Like I probably
I literally
we
just recovered.
We were all tired, but then you have things like SB 202 come around. You see HR 1 in the news in Congress. You see all these lawsuits happening in place. If I'm being honest, you just watch the news, it can get a little confusing, it can get a little over consuming, and then you'll start to pull away. So I think sometimes breaking those things down and saying, hey, this is what's happening, but that doesn't mean that we can't overcome this. It just requires, again, that year-round investment. It requires having these conversations well before November.
Absolutely. I don't know if y'all have had a chance to see the Amazon documentary, All In, Fight for Our Democracy. Stacey Abrams was in it. It was talked a little bit about her race, and it just really goes into just the pure history around voting rights in this country. And I always recommend that people, see this film. It's even, just sign up for Amazon free trial, and then, leave the trial. But it's worth it, because it really shows you that a lot of this stuff has been going on since the beginning. And I think when people can kind of understand that, even though it's still overwhelming when these different laws, these voter suppression laws come down the pipeline, but it also kind of puts everything into context of okay, this has been an ongoing fight, an ongoing process, to make sure we can keep our democracy, sound, and make sure that, all citizens, have a right to vote. So I always tell people to watch that film. But where do you see things going, past 2022 or 2024? What would you like to see for Power the Vote, or just for voting rights in general?
Yeah, so for me personally, what I'd like to, I've got cats screaming in the background, so I hope you guys can't hear that, but if you do, sorry. What I hope is that we invest in these programs for 2022 in these 5 states. I hope we can grow our program to additional states, but the really critical piece is that I hope that we have the funds in hand to invest these programs and keep them going for 2024. That's the one thing that I think has been missing historically from voter protection programs in the past. And so we want to change this kind of boom and bust cycle of voter protection and keep these programs going. For me, I think that will be one of the critical things, because it's going to help these programs build on that knowledge and experience, and they will be so much more better prepared for 2024 if we can keep them in place and then help those programs grow their success over time.
Yeah. And for me personally, the way that you spoke about voting in Illinois and the way that individuals speak about voting in California, I would hope that by investing in Democratic parties and the voter protection team, that Power the Vote can be a part of saying, in the future, when you talk about voting in Georgia, Florida, Arizona, North Carolina, and Texas, you'll also be speaking in that same way. You'll be speaking in a way that it wasn't a hard process and it wasn't arduous. You didn't think that the state was trying to stop you from voting, but you knew that your vote was protected, and you knew there were resources that you had that had your back when you went to the polls. And once you had your vote, after you cast your vote, and you knew that your vote was going to be counted, and you also knew that the ballot was going to be certified. You can't say that that's the case right now in the 5 states that we're working in. So I would like the Power to Vote to be a part of you being able to have that same conversation as you have in Illinois and California in those 5 states.
Yes, I mean, I just know I was on pins and needles, about my vote being counted. And then even now, I got a letter last week, and my polling location has been changed. I don't know, they never said the reason, and now it is a little farther away than what it was before. And then I received a text about voting by mail or absentee ballot for the upcoming, municipal elections. And, I had to stop and think, are these new laws, and I don't know if I want to put, my ID in here. And so now, it's kind of changing now. I may have to go back and do early vote in person when, I switched to vote by mail, here in Georgia, over the last year or so. So, these things are real. And I know I definitely called that hotline several times in 2020. And, we were pushing that number out across the Facebook groups and, really encouraging people. So yeah, I just feel like, I feel like we're going in the right direction. And again, all the work that was done in Georgia is, kind of like like you were saying, a model, for other places. And so can you maybe, if people want to get involved or if they want to make a donation, I know we're going to drop in the comments, in the comment section, your website and links to your website, but can you maybe, talk to people who maybe are in these states and what they can do to, support Power the Vote, and then people maybe who are, outside of those targeted states, what they can do to help?
Yeah, absolutely. So number one, go to our website, which is powerthevote.org, and you can sign up for our email list there. I'd encourage everybody to do that. We push out opportunities to volunteer in the voter protection space, both in our states and then also outside of our states. We've been promoting voter protection volunteering in Virginia for the upcoming November election, and we'll continue to promote opportunities to volunteer in voter protection teams through our email list. You can also donate to us. There's a donate link at our website at powerthevote.org. And then lastly, follow us on social media. We're going to continue to spread the news, and we hope that you'll tell other folks about Power the Vote. We're like big evangelists for the idea of full-time year-round investments in voter protection. We want other people to catch that vision too. We also want folks to be encouraged by our message, which is, look, in 2020, voting in Georgia was really hard. It wasn't like what we accomplished in Georgia was so easy, and what everybody accomplished in Georgia was so easy. It took all of us coming together. It took an army of people mobilizing to get the job done, to register voters, turn them out, and then ultimately make sure that their votes could be counted. And I want that to be a message of encouragement for folks that, like, yes, the landscape is really hard. We've got SB 202, we've got bills in Texas that have been passed, we've got bills in Florida that have been passed, in other states. But there's so much more that we can do. We hope to raise awareness of all of that and connect people to opportunities so that they can be a part of overcoming this voter suppression landscape and ultimately empowering voters.
And lastly, that was all great. Lastly, I would just like to put a plug in that if you're watching this live, tomorrow Power the Vote is having a program with Congressman Mondaire Jones. We'll share the link with you, Robin, if you don't mind sharing it with everyone. We love your support, and the fact that we're able to, collaborate with someone like Congressman Mondaire Jones just lets you know that, this just isn't, we're just not giving you lip service. We're really out there doing the work, trying to galvanize the support. And we hope that the things that we've said today has done that as well.
Absolutely. Well, yes, please send that link and I'm happy to share that around. I know for the OSSOF campaign, I was part of the group that ran the community mobilizing program. And so the basis, around that was, for those people who don't know, they hired about 2,000 or so community mobilizers across the state of Georgia. They were in every county, and we specifically hired people who had no involvement in campaigns before, no involvement in politics, because the idea was if we can bring them in and train them and get them to turn out their networks, it was a good chance that they also knew people who maybe wouldn't normally vote in a runoff or who weren't, as engaged in some of the Senate races. And so I remember Zoe Stein, she was one of our, team leads for our group. And she was saying, afterwards that, now so many people that we, the 2,000 some community mobilizers, now they know there's a voter protection line, now they know, this and that. And, and so that education is so important because people really will take that forward, and then they may share it with someone else if they know someone else is having an issue. And with these close elections in some of these states, all of that is important, in the end. And, people a lot of times, they may not understand the importance of protecting the vote, but then when we're down to the wire on election night, watching those returns come in, then they're looking for the lawyers, to, come and help and, to influence what's going to happen. So, so it's so important. And I think too, there's so much money thrown around in these election cycles, especially towards the end, just for all kind of craziness. And there has to be a way to, funnel some of that money into actually protecting the vote, so I really hope that people will support Power the Vote and volunteer or make a grassroots donation, or if big time, donors or funders, please, put them in touch with Power the Vote.
Thank you.
Agree. No complaint there. Agree.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And I hope you all will come back on, sometime next year. I would love to, check in with you all again, especially, before the midterms, and just kind of see how things are going. And, any support or help that you all need, please feel free to reach out, and we're all happy to share the resources.
Thank you, Robin. We
You're
appreciate
welcome. You're welcome. And tell Jason I said hello as well. So again, yeah, thank you again for joining us. And again, check the comment section. We're dropping the links for the website, and continue to check our groups, and we'll be posting about the work that Power the Vote's doing from here and going forward.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Robin.
Yes, you're welcome. Wonderful to see you all again. And thanks for coming on.
Thanks
you again.
You're welcome. Take care.
Right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Oh, yay. What do we do without our voter protection lawyers, So please, again, please get plugged in with Power the Vote. We really need people like them every step of the way in order to make sure that we have integrity in our election process, make sure we're able to protect our democracy. And so again, it doesn't matter what party or which party or who you're voting for. We just really need to make sure that everyone's vote is counted, and that all eligible American citizens can exercise their right to vote. So thanks again, Power the Vote. So happy that they're able to join us. All right, so let's move on. So exciting news. Stacey Abrams, she is on tour, everyone. She is going to select cities across the country this fall. She is going to be, I guess, talking about her latest book. And it says a conversation. So I'm sure she's going to be talking about voting rights and other issues. And we are, of course, all waiting to see if she's going to run for governor in 2022. So she has, I think, until March 2022 to officially announce. So she has a little time. But if you get an opportunity to go hear her speak in person, I highly recommend it. I have not, seen her in person in quite some time, but I've been to a few events, and it's totally worth it. She is just so warm and just so smart, and she's so compassionate and centered on people. That's what I just love about her the most. And it's all kinds of people usually that are at these events. So it's such a diverse and inclusive group. So you can go to her website, StaceyAbramsTour.com, and you can check out which city she's going to be in. She's not necessarily going to all the, big time major cities of like the New Yorks and LA and Chicago, to my knowledge. I'm not totally sure. Don't quote me on that, but she is going to places like Memphis and Durham, North Carolina, and Jacksonville, Florida. So, and some other places out west and up north as well. So please go and check out StaceyAbramsTour.com and sign up to attend the event. And please report back if you go. Please post photos in the Team Stacey Abrams grassroots groups or any of our sister groups, or contact me directly, and I'm happy to post your photos or any of your experiences. And super excited for her to just continue to elevate her voice across the country, and to spread the good word, because she's always talking about something positive that is going to benefit all people. All right, so speaking of Stacey, Fair Fight Action, they have launched the Freedom to Vote Fall, and they're asking that you contact your senators today at 833-465-7142. We had hot call summer going on. Fair Fight did in the summer. And I think they said, I think it was over 70,000 people made phone calls to their senators over the summer regarding voting rights, asking that these bills are passed. And so then, of course, once the fall hit, it became Freedom to Vote Fall. Now there are two bills that are already in the Senate. One is the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. That's one bill that deals with reinstating pre-clearance, which is when during the 1965 Voting Rights Act, certain Southern states had to get pre-clearance from the federal government, from the Department of Justice, in order to, change any laws or, do anything around voting due to their history of Jim Crow, tactics and voter intimidation and racial violence around voting. And so the Shelby v. Holder case in, I forgot which year, but I think it's 2012, 2013, it was 2013, I think, after Barack Obama was reelected for president. This case went up to the Supreme Court and it took out pre-clearance. So now these Southern states, they can do whatever they want around voting rights and they don't need to get pre-clearance from the Department of Justice. So if you watch, I think it was episode 2, I want to say, of Grassroots Voices, I did this whole thing on voting rights and, kind of walked through some of the history and why this is so important that we have pre-clearance. So check out that episode. But of course, like as we see, once that happened, they immediately started changing the laws to enact voter suppression laws right after that Shelby v. Holder ruling. So, and we've just only seen it, grow and become worse and worse since that time. So this is why it's so important that we get voting rights, both bills passed. So again, we have the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, and then we have the Freedom to Vote Act, which came out of the For the People's Act. So the Freedom to Vote Act, I believe, let me pull it up real quick. Let's see, because we are, there's movement on that as of a day or so ago. Okay, let me pull it up here. So this is coming from Fair Fight. So tomorrow, October 6th, which is so interesting because it's like a big astrological thing happening tomorrow, but tomorrow, October 6th, really important day at 2 p.m. Eastern, the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee will hold a hearing on the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. So it's great that the Judiciary Committee is taking this up and a hearing is happening. So again, that's a great time to call your senators. And again, if just to, because sometimes people are like, well, what do I say when I call? Just let them know that the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and the Freedom to Vote Act are going to take the necessary steps to protect our democracy and strengthen national standards for voting, regardless of our zip code. And it's going to help ensure that all eligible Americans can register to vote, cast a ballot, and have that ballot counted. And then that it's critical that the senators pass both of these bills. So it doesn't matter if you're in a red or blue state. It doesn't matter if, like, I know Senator Warnock and Senator Ossoff support voting rights. You still want to call, number one, to let them know that you're paying attention. And then number two, you want to let your voice be heard. And I used to work in a senator's office back in the day, and they absolutely keep track of those calls, and those reports go up to the senator each day. So it's so important that you exercise your voice and make sure that they know that you care, that you're paying attention. And if they do support voting rights, you're just showing your support to embolden and give them, more confidence and support to represent us when they're in Congress. So again, make sure you call. If you have not called yet, please call within the next day or two. It doesn't matter if it's after 5 or if it's on the weekend, you can leave a message. And if you call this number, it's really quick and easy. It takes literally less than 2 or 3 minutes. So please call your senators. And if you want more information on the Freedom to Vote Act or the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, please go to stopjimcrow2.com. stopjimcrow2.com, and you can get some more information there. And again, I played a video at the beginning of the show featuring people who've been having, issues voting. So if you can, call for them. All right, so the next piece of business, everybody. We got to get rid of this filibuster. I don't know if it's going to happen this year, next year, 4 years from now. We have to eliminate the filibuster because it is getting in the way. I don't really like looking at this man's face. I haven't put my little paper over it. No, but we have to eliminate the filibuster because we're not going to get anything done. And, Senator Mitch McConnell, he has been standing in the way of so much progress from, just you name it, climate change, police reform, what else? Voting rights, infrastructure, anything that they can stand in the way, they will. And we have to eliminate the filibuster. There's just no way around it. And so I'm going to have a call to action. It's in the comment section, Common Cause. They are, constantly, sending around petitions and calling for stories and various things to focus on eliminating the filibuster. And that's also something that you can mention to your senators as well, passing voting rights as well as the infrastructure bill and making sure that, the infrastructure bill is funded and making sure that we eliminate the filibuster. So I'm going to play a short video right now that I think, is helpful for those of you, because it's confusing. This is why I'm learning. And this is why I'm doing this show too, is because this stuff is confusing and it's done like this for a reason, and set up like this for a reason, to keep certain voices and certain demographics and the majority of this country to keep us, in check pretty much. So I'm going to share this video now so you can just get a little taste of what we're talking about here. There might be one ad. Let's see. Oh no. Okay, perfect. Here we go.
People are the US Senate. They pass law. These 100 people are the US Senate. They pass laws. They vote, and when a majority says yes, it passes. But these days, the Senate doesn't do that very often.
The Senate holding 2 votes, both failed.
It's completely dysfunctional.
4 versions of gun control proposals and all 4 failed.
See, the Senate has this rule. It says before they vote, 60 people have to agree to have the vote. That means just 41 people, a minority, can entirely block a bill. This is called a filibuster. Early on, filibusters were rare. This is a chart of the number of times the Senate has had a vote to break a filibuster in the last 100 years. But in the last 50 years, they started to grow. And now, almost every big bill.
Sarah, you said you were buying a...
Sorry. One second.
Is filibustered. The US Senate is broken, and the filibuster broke it. But the Senate didn't always have this rule. In fact, it all kind of happened by accident. This is the Senate in 1805. It's much smaller than it is now. And the filibuster as we know it today doesn't exist yet. And before they vote on a bill, they debate. If they want to end debate and vote, they just need a majority to agree. But Vice President Aaron Burr thinks a high-minded place like the Senate should have as much debate as needed. So the Senate gets rid of the rule. Now senators can debate for as long as they want, and there's no way to stop them. This is the beginning of the Senate filibuster. At first, it isn't really a problem. Because the Senate is still pretty small, there's only so long a group of senators can physically talk. Eventually they tire out, debate ends, and they get to a vote. But as the US grows, so does the Senate, and they have more factions and more people to filibuster bills. They move to a bigger room, and now it's 1917. World War I is underway, but the US isn't involved. Then President Woodrow Wilson asks Congress to authorize a broad military action. A group of senators don't want to give Wilson the power to enter the war, so they decide to debate until the session ends. Filibuster. Woodrow Wilson is mad, and he demands that they go back to the old Senate rules. The debate can be ended with a simple majority. The Senate doesn't want to do that, so instead they compromise. They change the rules so they can end debate with the approval of 2/3 of the Senate, so that if senators want to block a bill, they need 1/3 to do it. This is basically the system we have today. A supermajority to agree to vote, and a simple majority to pass a law. And for a few decades, the filibuster is used, but pretty sparingly. Then in the 1950s, the Senate starts to consider civil rights legislation, and Southern senators really hate this. But they don't have the votes to actually defeat the bills, so they start using the filibuster to block bills. Here's South Carolina Senator Strom Thurmond. He looks tired because he just filibustered the 1957 Civil Rights Act for more than 24 hours. These filibusters are painstaking, and they block the Senate from actually doing work. The majority leader at the time, Mike Mansfield, doesn't like this. He's okay with needing a supermajority to pass things. What he doesn't like are these long, pointless speeches. So he makes a change. He skips the debate and goes directly to a vote to see if there's a supermajority to end debate. This means if senators want to filibuster, they don't have to stand up and talk. They can just threaten to, as long as they have the numbers to block a supermajority vote. This makes it way easier to filibuster. And the number of filibusters grows. In the mid-70s, the Senate changes the threshold needed to filibuster. Now instead of 34 senators, you need 41, but it doesn't make much of a difference. And then around the 2000s, senators in the minority start to realize something. They can gain more politically by fighting than by cooperating. So they filibuster everything the other party wants to do. That's what leads to this spike. Now, almost every big bill is filibustered. Finally, in 2013, the Democratic majority makes a change to the rules that says the filibuster no longer applies to certain confirmation votes. In 2017, the Republican majority makes another similar change. Both times, it feels like a huge deal. But now, things are beginning to change. The 2020 elections are coming up, and Democrats have some big proposals.
Healthcare in America.
Federal investment in teachers' salaries. Investments in clean energy.
But Democrats know even if they have a majority in the Senate, they're not going to get the 60 votes needed to overcome a filibuster. And that's why a new idea is now on the table.
Would you urge the Senate Democratic leader to get rid of the filibuster?
I think we have to have that on the table.
To get rid of the filibuster. Get rid of the filibuster.
Getting rid of an old tradition naturally feels radical. But here's one more story about the filibuster. The Senate is only one half of Congress. The other half, the House of Representatives, also used to have rules that allow the minority party to filibuster bills. Then, in 1888, Republicans won control of the House, but the filibuster rules kept them from actually passing anything. It was like the election, and ultimately the will of the people didn't even matter. So, they got rid of it. And the reasoning was pretty simple. If the party that loses an election can block the winners from doing anything, what does it mean to be a democracy?
Okay. So again, got to end that filibuster. All right, so what's next? Next week, episode 10. I can't even believe there's been 10 episodes already. Started Grassroots Voices Friday, August 13th of 2021. And here we are, October 5th, and we've already had 10 episodes. And I'm really excited and happy that I was able to keep it going each week. You know, I really just wanted to make sure that, it was coming from a good quality place. So as long as there were people willing to come on and I could put these shows together, I would keep it going as much, as long as I could. So episode 10, we're celebrating by recapping the Atlanta rally in March for reproductive justice that took place this past Saturday, October 2nd. There were rallies and marches all over the country, some through the Women's March and then other affiliates. So there were, again, rallies all over the country, and we had one here in Atlanta, and I was honored to be part of the committee to, start putting all of this together. So I wanted to bring on two special guests. Reed Jones, he's the founder of the infamous Stacey Abrams for President Facebook page. It's so funny because Reed is a young organizer, and Reed has, I mean, I'm a huge Stacey Abrams fan and supporter, and Reed is like times 1,000. So I can't wait for you to meet Reed. And then Jen Nelson, she's an activist here in Georgia, and Reed and Jen, they were the reason I was brought in to help be part of the leadership committee for the Atlanta Rally and March for Reproductive Justice. So I want to bring them on, and that was my first time being part of a leadership for a large, mass event like that. So I was there to learn and to just, offer support. But it was really cool to see how everything came through. And, we just communicated over the Signal app. And it was just like, it started from like a seed being planted, and then it just blossomed into this very incredible, successful event that took place this past Saturday. So I want Reed to come on, and I want Jen to come on, so they both can speak to about the inclusivity of planning this and all of the different partner organizations and sponsors that came together in such a short time to put everything together here. So please tune in. We're going to meet up on Tuesday, October 12th at 6 p.m. Eastern. And again, this will be streamed live through the Stacey Abrams, Team Stacey Abrams Grassroots Group. So if you go to facebook.com/groups/Stacey Abrams Protect the Vote, you will find our Team Stacey group. And then of course, once the show starts, I share it across all of our other sister groups and other affiliates. So please tune in so we can hear about the Atlanta Rally and March for Reproductive Justice. And I will have some videos and photos I'll be sharing from the march this past weekend. I'll be sharing them in the groups, and we'll also share them during that show. So you could just really see the energy behind it. And there were so many funny signs that I'll try to pull those together as well. But it was good vibes, and all types of people were there. It wasn't only women, but there were all types of people, who took place. And I also want to, kind of touch on how reproductive justice impacts so many different type of people. So we're not really getting that full narrative a lot of times when you think about women's reproductive issues and just reproductive justice in general. So please consider joining us then. Also, call Brian Kemp. I showed at the top of the show a couple of videos. Brian Kemp is going around here spreading disinformation, misinformation regarding this HIV/AIDS vaccination that does not exist. So this is just more disinformation and misinformation that's being put out there to confuse people. It's a tragedy. It's really a shame that we have someone like this in leadership who, as ICU beds and as hospitals are filled up, the ICUs are filled up, whether it's due to COVID or other issues, he won't expand Medicaid. It's really disgusting. And so we really have to start putting pressure on Brian Kemp. So the number is 404-656-1776. And of course, he's up for re-election. So we have to make sure that we're continuing to pressure and press him to expand Medicaid and really to stop the disinformation, misinformation. And we want to give, again, a shout out and support to our dear friend of the show, Dante Carter. He is running for mayor of Sandy Springs. He was recently Sandy Springs is here in Georgia. It's a suburb right outside of Atlanta. He was recently endorsed by Fair Fight Action, which is a huge endorsement. They don't just endorse anybody and everybody at all. And he's a proud alum of Florida A&M University, my alma mater, and Dante's as well. And he also was in the journalism school, which is where I graduated from too. So we didn't know each other, but I know that he comes from excellence in academia from Florida A&M. And he is just a phenomenal candidate. We need public servants like this in office. He has a lovely wife who is a doctor. She's an OBGYN. So she is on the front lines of just everything happening in the healthcare system here in Georgia. And they have a wonderful little daughter who is on the campaign trail all the time. And he's just got a really great spirit and a really great campaign going. So he was one of our guests on the show. I believe it was episode 3. So please check out episode 3 if you want to learn more about Dante Carter. And again, his election is coming up November 2nd here in Georgia. Georgia, mayor of Sandy Springs, and he's really actually facing all kind of racism and attacks. And again, this is not reflective of Sandy Springs. This is, a small group, small-minded group of people or person who, he's making waves, and so he's really, just bringing so much awareness around this race. And obviously when that happens, people start to get intimidated and scared. So they're trying to, do that, intimidate Dante, but he's not going to be intimidated, and we have his back. So please, if you can, even if you're not in Georgia, even if you're not in Sandy Springs, please consider donating to his campaign. I'm going to drop the link in the comments section. Any grassroots donations are appreciated. If you can make some phone calls or send postcards, or you want to do anything like that, please go to danteformayor.com. Again, we'll drop the link in the comments, and please try to show any support that you can for Dante and his race. If you are in Georgia, please utilize your social media and please uplift Dante in this race. Thank you. And lastly, if you have any comments, show ideas, guest suggestions, please email me at grassrootsvoices999@gmail.com, and I will do my best to get through the comments and read any show ideas. I know I've received some emails from people about some guest suggestions, so I'm working on them, but we are booked the rest of the month and working on finishing booking up the rest of November before the holidays. So again, please get your show ideas. If you have contacts or recommendations, I'd love to hear them. And lastly, if you want to show support through a grassroots donation, I will receive it and say thank you. So I put my Venmo and PayPal here. Again, this show takes work and it takes time and energy. I do this as a labor of love, just because I think it's fun. And again, I just run across so many amazing people who are doing a lot of very valuable work in this space, work that is going to uplift all communities and support all people. And so that's why, I wanted to do this show. But of course, like I said, it takes time, work, and energy. So if you do want to make a grassroots donation, that's fine. Some people like to do that. They'll say, if I was in town, I'd buy you some coffee or lunch, but if I'm not here, just, take this, take yourself out. So that's one way to help. Other ways, of course, you can like and share this episode, tag a friend in the comments, join our groups, and keep fighting for voting rights. And by keep fighting for voting rights, I mean call your senators. So please make sure you're calling your senators this week and letting them know that they need to pass voting rights and to get rid of the filibuster. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to end the show with a quick video that comes out of Civics for the Culture. And this is where Stacey Abrams is going to touch on pre-clearance, which is part of the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, and kind of explain it in a way that people can understand. But Civics for the Culture is an awesome initiative. It just came out. It's been around for the last year or so, but they're starting to do these videos now and starting to educate people on civics, which is exactly what we need, what we were talking about with Jamil and with Kimberley from Power the Vote earlier in the conversation. But I'm going to play this video and then I'll close out the show after that. Again, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate all the support and the well wishes, and we're going to wrap up right after this video.
Hey y'all, welcome to the first episode of Civics for the Culture. This series will provide you with everything you need to know about the political process and what you can do to get involved. My name is Chelsea. I'm a Libra. I'm from Atlanta, and I'm also on the Fair Fight Action team, and I run our Civics for the Culture series. Please tell me you're curious about this. I figured if we want to truly protect our freedom to vote and protect that freedom for our aunties, our parents, our uncles, our cousins, then we should really understand what we are protecting. This space is for us to learn the facts so we can make the change we really want to see. And the first step is knowing, and I'll give you all of the other steps. So sit back with me as I call on some friends and some experts to help me help y'all, because it's a lot, but we got this. I know you heard about how states are banning volunteers from handing out water if you're standing in line to vote, or removing ballot drop boxes, even shortening the days for us to early vote. I mean, making it harder for voters to vote by mail, and so many people voted by mail last year. Bills like these have been brought up by our state senators and representatives. It's happened in almost every single state. You saw all of the dope shit that happened last year. We got a new president, a new vice president, and we really exercised our power. Well, some of those state senators and representatives were big mad about how many people, especially people that look like us, turned out. Earlier this year, state senators and representatives introduced bills that can make it harder for us and new people trying to vote. They high-key keep trying us. For example, Senate Bill 202 in Georgia, there's a new anti-voter law. But if Congress passes federal legislation like the For the People Act or the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, there will be fewer barriers for people to cast their vote. Our U.S. senators and our U.S. representatives can vote on these federal bills to prevent any of the bullshit that Republicans are trying to do in our state legislatures. This is why federal legislation is so important. Now, a lot of this mess wouldn't happen if the 1965 Voting Rights Act wasn't gutted by the Supreme Court back in 2013. This was a big deal. The Supreme Court took away so many protections for voters, especially ones from southern states who live in places that have historically discriminated against Black and brown voters. So this is where it gets a little complicated, and I feel like I need to call on an expert who's also my bestie to kind of walk us through this.
It's okay, Chelsea. I'm here to help. Here's the deal. In the wake of the 2020 election, Republicans in state legislatures didn't like the results of the presidential election, so they mobilized across the country to pass laws making it harder to vote. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 gives the federal government the ability to protect us from these kinds of anti-voting laws. Unfortunately, in 2013, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down the formula that protected voters, and that gutted Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. Under Section 5, states and counties with a history of racial discrimination in voting needed federal review before their new rules and laws took effect. The process known as pre-clearance. Pre-clearance means the Justice Department or the courts look at proposed changes to voting in those jurisdictions before the laws become official. So the federal government could stop states from discriminating against people of color before it happened. After the Supreme Court's Shelby versus Holder decision, states with a history of racial discrimination could engage in those practices again, passing laws to make it harder for people of color to vote. That's why we call it Jim Crow 2.0. Without Section 5, states like Georgia, Texas, and Arizona enacted new restrictions and anti-voting laws because they can, just like they could before the Voting Rights Act was passed. The reason for these laws is clear. They want to limit who votes in order to maintain their power. Pre-clearance is a necessary protection for millions of Americans who could otherwise be denied the rights to vote. It's easier to stop suppression than to redo elections. The John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act would require key states to seek federal review before making new voting laws in their states. But pre-clearance won't be back until Congress restores the Voting Rights Act to full strength. And we need your help to make it so. Right now, we are calling members of Congress and urging them to take action. Call your senators today and tell them to pass the For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. Call 833-465-7142 or visit stopjimcrow2.com.
Thank you, Stacy. Oh my gosh. Okay. Whew, that was gonna be difficult. This is Chelsea. I'm signing off. I'll see y'all in a couple of weeks for another episode of Civics for the Culture.
So cute, guys. That is so cute. All right, I think that is it. So again, this is Grassroots Voices with Robin and Friends, where community and politics meet. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much to Power the Vote, founders Jamil A. Favors and Kimberley Allen. It was fantastic to speak with them and to be able to just support people who are doing phenomenal work out there that is protecting our democracy and making sure that all voices are heard in the process. So again, please like this episode, like the video, share it, comment, tag people, send me any comments or show recommendations to grassrootsvoices999@gmail.com. And otherwise, I will see you next week, Tuesday, October 12th at 6 p.m., where we recap the the Reproductive Justice March and Rally, because it's larger than that. We recap that on next Tuesday, and I'm going to be joined by Reed Jones and Jen Nelson. And yeah, have a fabulous day. Call your senators, tell them to get rid of the filibuster, and ask them to really demand that they pass voting rights and that we are paying attention and that we need this. So again, thank you so much for joining us. Be safe, stay healthy, and stay kind to one another. And I will see everybody next week. Thank you. Good night.